Hey everybody, welcome to the weekend vid. We're just gonna take a look at what we see to start the new year. So what we saw last week on SPY, we talked about it for the C2 on a Tuesday. Yep, there's your outside week. And you'll see they go 2-2, 2-2-2, boom, outside week. Very, very nice. So now the question is, do we stay down there or not? So here is what it looks like, your big broad information on the day. If we stay down, we have 2-2 month. And I have a reason to believe that this may work because of what we see in the rest of the market. But 2-2 month SPY. If you get a Qs, that's a shooter 2-2 month to start the year. So same thing, right? You're gonna have some daily broad information in there. Question is, do they stay down and get that expansion or not? And ideal scenario would be you get a slight poke up and then really send them home. That'd be the most fun scenario. If we go to Dow Jones, you're going to see, did we talk about that 2-2 on a Tuesday? We did. Did they do it? They did. What does that look like? That's going to be a 3-2-2 reversal to start the year on the month. And anytime we're below 42172, you're going to want to know about that. We may reclaim this scenario 3, which could broaden things up a bit. And then maybe, they have bigger problems on the year. For now, we're still a 1, so be aware of that. And then IWM. This one's the most interesting here. Hasn't done the quarter yet, but 2-2 shooter quarter below 214.60. I'd like to know about that because we'd reclaim this inside bar, which would reclaim this scenario 3. Could become bigger problems, and it looks very similar to 08. If we go to, SPY. Back in 08, you can see slight higher highs on the year, and then 2-2 reversal to start off. It was in 07 they started it, but then 08 they started really sending them home. So we'll see, but we'd love to make a slight higher high and come back in because it could do this. So when we go to IWM and look at the quarter, you want to keep that in mind. Do we? We do. That being said, specific sectors, you're going to see the real estates inside quarter down. That's going to be a problem. So notice they didn't take the previous highs. And as far as your broad information, you got these guys that you're coming back into. So bigger levels of reclaim on the left, this, right? So if this goes inside down, which it did, we're going to take these guys out, which may take out this as well for potentially a real estate problem this year. If we go to the home builders, you're going to see home builders are also starting 3-2-2 quarter, which is where your Dow Jones is coming from. So anytime you're below that, we'll take these guys out. And if you remember it from the inside months we talked about into the end of the last year, pivot machine gun, that worked really nice. And what that will tell you is, things like Home Depot potentially taking last quarter's lows, we'll see. Lows, taking last quarter's lows, funny enough. If we go to things like TOL, closer taking last quarter's lows. KBH, not actionable signal, but taking last quarter's lows, could become shooter year, kind of like IWM, pokes up. Maybe they come back in, and we'll see. If you go to PHM, closer to taking last year's lows, you see closer to the quarter down. These are all home builders. And we will look at the real estate shortly. I forgot to do that. If we go to, there's one I'm missing. Chuck will probably throw it in the comments. Give me one sec here. So here it is, Lennar. Lennar is the shooter 2-2 year. So some of the home builders having some issues, specifically Lennar to start off the year. When we go to the real estates, we will see things like AMT closer to the 2-2 year down. For real estates, we're also going to have PLD closer to an inside year down. EQIX, nowhere near any reversals. Well, nothing. And then LSI, nothing. So I want to make sure that's actually the correct one. I'm not sure if it was. Doesn't look like it was. It might not be listed anymore. That being said, though, it's really going to be your AMT, which is normally our focus. There's also like CBRE, which just isn't doing anything on the year, on a quarter, maybe. But we want stuff taking last year's lows. That being said, another sector, you're going to see the staples, XLP, inside quarter down to start the year. It's already near pivots, but we got 3 months to go after it. So if it's going to get worse, it'll get worse, right? We know that. And that being said, it could take the year down still if they're going to be weak. And that's going to tell you things like Coca-Cola. So you can see quarter down on a 6-month basis. You got a big shooter if you like using multiple time frame analysis, closer to the shooter year down. And that's one of the bigger holdings there. Pepsi taking the year down. And it's just continuation on the bigger time frames, but they are hitting the bid. You will see they are reclaiming all these guys in here to start the year. You'll see things like Philip Morris, shooter quarter potentially coming off of the top of its broadening formation with the new yearly open. So although it's inside year, that stays 2 on the quarter. It's trying to take these guys out, which might cause problems. If we go to, you'll also see Procter & Gamble. Notice the 2-2 quarter with some pivots to go after to the downside in here, pivot machine gun style. So anytime they're below 159.81, we want to know about that. And then those are kind of like the biggest holdings. We'll see if there's any other. We're going to see MDLZ taking last year's lows to start in the staples. We will also see Colgate taking last quarter's lows in the staples. So we got a lot of staples doing that, and that's not even all of them. If we start going through, you're going to have GIS, inside year down in the staples, reclaiming all these guys, pivot machine gun style on here, pivot, 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 pivot to go and take those guys out. Good for the small account guys looking to get into the swings. We'll see MKC. That's something I want to know about. Look at this. The quarterly pivot machine gun to take all this stuff out, 72 to 60 in one go, or 59, which could take the inside year down. And maybe, you know, if they really have some bad stuff going on, you'll take all this stuff out in one go. This is what we like to see, where the quarter can take the year, which can take all of that. We're going to have KVUE, the 322 on the quarter. So looking to go and take the 1767 out below last quarter's lows. TAP, the 122 RevStrat quarter. So if you're going to focus on a singular sector, you could look at the staples. Definitely, there's a ton of them. Chicken noodle soup, CPB. You're going to see the inside year end down, so trying to get out of this thing. And if that works, maybe you take a lot of these guys out, chicken noodle soup style. Take them all out. Outside of that, there's not too much I can mention here, but we can see a lot of them. I'm going to specifically try and remember MKC because that one looks pretty cool. And you got a monthly reversal in force. If you're waiting for a signal, you could use a 6-month chart to do that, but definitely want to know about the staples. The materials sector side of things, you're going to see the 3-2 month to the downside, and we'll take a look. And let me correct that, 3-2 quarter. So we will see a ECL 3 month, 2-2 to the downside to start, still very much an inside year. MLM, you can see shooter quarter to trigger shooter year. So potentially some problems there. SHW, you're going to see the 2-2 quarter back through previous range to the downside of the materials sector here. And these are only the higher ATR ones, and filtered this out. And then STLD, which is quarter down to start, closer to the shooter week next week, along with APD, I believe. Nope. Along with ALB, closer to the 2-2 week with the quarter down. So APLD and STLD will have weekly signals to try and get those things moving. So we've kind of covered home builders, we've covered staples, we've covered materials. Outside of that, since we have all the indexes taking last month's lows, you know, we want to focus on that type of stuff. It's still early in the year, so we can't say, you know, the market's crashing, the sky's falling. But what we can say is if you're long anything taking last year's lows, you got problems. So we'll add in there, AMD is taking last year's lows, outside week last week. So if that stays out of that, they're going to have bigger problems than AMD for sure. Anytime we're below this type of stuff, 117.90. And I just want to see if we have any other rev strats in force on the year that we can mention to start. Looks like AVY is the only other one, and this one is in your consumer cyclical. So I believe that's your XLY, but closer to 2 down rev strat in force this year, and weekly shooter to try and get that going. So now when we take a look at the weekly signals setting up, let's see how many shooters we got, how many inside bars we got. So setting up with 2-2 reversal into the new week is going to be SMH. 2-week inside bar pattern countered by a 2-2 below 244.84, just about 244.92, and you'd have these pivots to go and take out below that. And what that tells you is things like ASML closer to the 222 week to the downside, so there goes rev strat, and then 222 might take you back down here. If you go to ARM, closer to 322 to the downside. If we go to AMAT, closer to 322 to the downside. NVIDIA obviously had issues last week, so closer to 2.2 if they can stay anywhere below this stuff, or else you reclaim, you might try and go test those highs again. Marvel, closer to 322. Let's see if we're missing anyone in there. So it looks like that's about it. And we obviously know AMD outside week. So anytime we're below last week's lows AMD, we want to know about those guys. When looking at this, we're also going to see a lot of things. You know, Google 2 up in red, but inside month. Microsoft 2 up in red. Closer are going to have the shooter month to the downside potentially, so closer to 2-2 to confirm that. No daily signals or anything, so we got a few of those in the tech crowd closer to the 2-2 week, which would cause the shooter month, but you'd be stuck inside of last year's range, so not the best one in the world. Dash closer to 3-2-2 week below this, around 168, which would cause the 2-2 month. When we're looking at, you know, specific sectors here, the real estates that we know are weak. Want to see if there's any other ones in there that we see. It doesn't look like it. Maybe EPR, which is not one I've traded before. And a lot of nobodies in there, so nothing there to really talk about. The staples, looks like CELH is in there. So potentially 322 CELH, which has been, you know, dropping like a rock recently. You got this 3 last year, so potentially 3-2, and they go a lot further. You're gonna have more problems. There's another one in there I just missed out on. ELF, which is in the staples, closer to the 2-2 month. Closer to the 2-2 week to trigger it. So you got a few of those in there. Really, I like the stuff we've already talked about just on the bigger time frames. They look really good. Just to look for them to continue. Let's see. With the Dow Jones taking last month's lows, potentially last quarters, we'll also see CAT 322 quarter outside week. So anytime they're below last week's lows, if they're going to keep expanding, you'll have that with DE. Inside month 312 reversal down after making new all-time highs. So you got a bigger broadening formation in here. Potentially come back through all these guys. So you have the sub try and you also have major try to come back through. And you will see DE is also outside week with CAT. And that's going to be your XLI, which would be 2-2 next week if they're going to reconfirm, taking the 3-2 quarter down. Outside of that, I'm not seeing too much yet. Just give me a sec. So the only thing I'm seeing here on the downside that's picking up my eye a little bit is like the healthcares. XLV was up last week, could become 2-2 back down with XBI. As you can see, it did go outside with maybe some news, but MRK. You see shooter outside week for the 2-bar rev strat, which would take the month down. I believe that could also take the 3-2 year down. DHR, you see goes up. Shooter week back down below this stuff. You got daily Momo shoot to break it. SNY, shooter rev strat week. There is a few other ones that I haven't traded before, but ALC, inside week shooter. IDXX, shooter 322, which is a form of a rev strat in here on the week, which would cause a 2-2 month reversal, which would cause the rev strat 1-2 year. So got a lot of healthcare stuff showing up on that list, and might even have stuff like Pfizer here, which is outside week, slight shooter in there. If they're going to try and give her the rev strat months back to the downside. And MRNA, the shooter week, back in. So you make it simultaneous shooter week healthcares. That kind of sums up that. The only other thing I wanted to say is on the upside of things, we have airlines. American Airlines can be a looker here above 1820. You would want to go after like the 20 calls for at least a couple months of time, if not like a year of time, see if that can get going. Pivot machine gun style. United Airlines You can see it starts the year off pretty strong. Delta Airlines, pretty strong start to the year while the market's puking. And then JetBlue, not the strongest start, but still up there. Also Alaska Airlines, pretty strong start to the new year. So you'll see this continuation, maybe back through this stuff. So American Airlines on the upside. Outside of that, on the upside for the hammers, we're not going to have a lot of known names in here, but HSAI, the 222 setting up anytime you're above 1571. And then I like Orion in here. Potentially the hammer week back through previous range. Not one I've traded before, so it may not have weekly options. And there's like a few utilities, few industrials, few energies, few real estates, few discretionary cruise lines, Norwegian cruise lines here. Love the pivot machine gun week hammer above this. CCL, slight hammer week. Royal Caribbean, potentially slight hammer pivot machine gun week. Just not as many upside name setups on the hammer list. And as far as two down and greens are concerned, a little bit better, about 30 names, but we just have way more setting up to the downside. So, we'll see, but we have, a good idea. A lot of things are going down to start. A lot of things are closer to continue going down to start. So that is what we're going to think going into the new year, at least so far. Hit the stuff taken last year's and last quarter's lows that we've mentioned. And, if you want to go after the stronger names that we've talked about here as well, you can do that too. But that's all I've got for you guys in today's weekend vid. Hope you guys enjoyed. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, drop them in the comments below. And I'll try and get to those. But adios and have a great rest of your weekend.